Hey there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Bible in Life podcast. My name is John, and I am the creator of the Bible in Life, and our goal on the Bible in Life podcast is to provide what I like to call blue jeans theology, by which I mean discussing the Bible and Bible passages and Bible teaching in such a way that it's connected to our everyday life, it's in the language of everyday life, so that it can help us follow Jesus right in the midst of our everyday life. And on this episode, my friend Stephen and I are going to have sort of a one-off conversation on a topic that he himself had a question about. It's a topic that the leadership at his church has been discussing. It is a topic that a lot of people are curious about, and that is in the midst of the elder qualifications in Titus chapter 1 and 1 Timothy chapter 3, there's this little mention of the elder's kids and the elder's family and the elder's household. It says that an elder needs to be a person who manages his own household well. And in Titus, it specifically says that his children should be believers or believing or faithful. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean if someone who has unbelieving adult sons or daughters, are they automatically disqualified from church leadership? And that then prompts the question, well, if so, that doesn't quite seem fair, because how do we guarantee that our kids are going to turn out to be believers? And when they're adults, we don't have absolute influence or authority over their life. So exactly how does that relate to this qualification for church leadership and eldership? And so in this episode of the Bible in Life, Stephen and I are going to explore this topic and this question from those qualifications. So sit back and reflect with us as we wrestle with what does Paul mean to Timothy and Titus that an elder must be someone who manages his own household well. All right. Hey there, Stephen.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, you mentioned a topic of interest, a conversation that you've been having with some of the leadership at your church, and you thought it might be worth just kind of a conversation for us to have on the podcast. So why don't you just kind of set that up and raise the question? Let's talk about this.
Sure. Yeah, I'm curious your thoughts on this. Something that we've been talking about at my church quite a bit lately. But also is a pretty big topic um, as a kid growing up as well for me. So
Oh,
curious some of your thoughts on this. It has to do with elder qualifications and a couple specifically where Scripture calls out elders managing their household well, and kind of with that, children who believe.
mm-hmm.
And there's different, I think it's worth, first of all, saying that, different translations translate that phrase differently. Children who
Yeah.
believe, children who are believers, or, there's different ways that's been translated. Um, but really is the idea of, so you have several children, and one of them, as they grow into those teenage years, kind of fall away from the family faith, I guess you could kind of say.
Yeah.
They were raised all the same way. For example, I'm one of four siblings, and my dad was an elder, and um, a couple of us went a little rogue for a while there, and um, would have said that they were not believers for some years there. Thankfully now everyone now would say again that they are, which is great. But does that disqualify um, the elder if their children aren't believers, if they grow into that, especially?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of the frame, but just
No, and
curious.
it's an important question, because you do have these passages in Timothy and Titus, right?
Yep.
So we have that, uh, and we have real life experience. And then the reality is, well, wait a second, why why should I be completely held accountable for what the choices my kids make?
Yep.
And I mean, we because you don't have any guarantees as kids grow older. None of us do as
Yep.
parents, right? So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that I mean, that's just the reality,
Yeah, that's
right?
kind of my, to add a layer of context for me personally, um, is that as an elder, I'm an elder at my church, and I have young kids who, they still think mom and dad are awesome, and, they think Jesus is awesome. And, um, but it's quite possible that I could grow into a phase where they don't think that anymore. And it's not because I started to teach them differently, they are their own people. So
Yeah.
would I grow into elder disqualification? If one of them were to go off the reservation, and that, so those, all those kind of questions that come with that.
Yeah. Let me just read the passages that are we're thinking about out of Timothy, and then I'll read it Titus's version as well, so that we can at least hear what the text says. So, First Timothy chapter 3, verse 4 says that an elder must manage his own household well, with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone can't manage his own household, how will he care for the church of God? So that's one text. The other one is going to be in the parallel passage in Titus chapter 1. And Titus chapter 1, um, really the same sort of qualification. It says, let me just find the exact right spot here. Um,
I think it's 5.
yeah, it's verse 6 in Titus 1. It says, so again, giving a list of qualifications, if anyone is above reproach, the husband of one wife, and his children are believers and not open to the charge of debauchery and insubordination. That's the way Titus puts it, or Paul puts it in his letter to Titus. So
Hmm.
in both Timothy and Titus, Paul gives instructions pertaining to the management of the household and the kids. That's the passages that raises this question for you personally, your dad in the past, or some of the discussions you're having with the leadership at your present church and all of that.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so my first thought as I just think about those two passages are, first of all, how the list of qualifications don't function and how they do function. Uh, it's a mistake to take these list of qualifications and turn them into a checklist, right? Where okay, we'll list all these off. We'll make a master list. We'll combine Timothy and Titus into a big master list. We'll have a list of whatever, 15, 18, 20 qualifications. We'll put little, square check boxes next to them. And that's how we're going to evaluate our potential elders is we're going to run them through this list. Yep. I've never known them to get drunk. Yep. I've never known them to be in a bar fight. Yep. Right. And we're going to check the boxes. I don't think
Hmm.
that's quite the way they're intended to function. I think they're more descriptive of the kind of person that we're after. So they function as um, in both Timothy and Titus as an elder is supposed to be a sort of like a model disciple, not a perfect disciple, but a disciple who someone can look at and say, I can imitate that person. And Paul intends to give some criteria for that. What are we talking about? If they're going to be somebody that is people can look up to and trust and provide a concrete picture of discipleship to Jesus. It's people like this.
Hmm.
There's other qualifications, that we know are qualifications for all Christians that aren't on here, right? So
Yep.
there's more to being a good disciple than what's here. This is
Yep.
a description of okay, we're assuming you've got some of the basic characters of a Christian. Here's some other things as a leader we want you to have. So that's one thought.
Yep.
The other thought is, what's the purpose of the manage the own household and manage the children criteria given in this list? What's the purpose of it in the list?
Well, uh, I think the idea is that your small household at home is just a small sample of the kind of things you'll be dealing with in the household of your congregation that you're shepherding. A bigger household,
Yeah,
same
yeah,
problems.
exactly. And so it particularly in their world where the church often met in the home, where the church acted like a extended family, um, and where the household was more than just mom, dad, and two kids. So to manage your own household well, as Paul says to Timothy, um, well, a household um, included, your immediate kids. It included servants who worked, who took care of the house, servants who took care of the grounds. In a Greco-Roman household, you also often had employees who worked for the head of the household, ran errands, maybe ran some business deals for him, right? So when you manage your own household in Ephesus, for in the case of First Timothy, or Crete in the case of Titus, right? When you manage your own household, you're managing something that's a bigger affair than just mom, dad, and 2.3 kids or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the household becomes a testing ground for your ability to oversee people. That's really what it is. Do you have the character and the skill set necessary to oversee a group of people? And and then Paul gets specific in both Timothy and Titus with the kids. And since the kids are the ones that you're most in a position to influence,
Mm-hmm.
do you have the character and the ability evidenced by your kids to care for, to manage, and to lead them in a way that they would want to imitate your faith? That's fundamentally the point of that criteria. So it becomes an opportunity to evaluate, a person's leadership ability and uh, character competencies. Um, but it's not the only criteria or the only test of that. Does that mean that a person who doesn't have kids could never be an elder? I mean, a person who's not married could never be an elder?
Sure. Yeah, there's lots of questions that aren't explicitly addressed.
Yeah, yeah, right. So all of that is sort of at least some caveats for how this list is functioning, how the what like, all right, so what does that mean? What if some teenagers or even some adult kids are no longer followers of Jesus? Does that automatically disqualify a person from being an elder? That's the question.
Basically, yep.
Yeah, yeah. Um, m- my answer to that is no, but like no, it doesn't automatically disqualify that person, but it does raise a question that should be investigated. Why is that? Why is that? Is there a person makes their own choice, right? Adam and Eve went their own way, and their only parent was God, right?
Yeah,
So persons make their own choices, and our kids will make their own choices. We don't have any guarantees. As they move into adulthood, the upper teen years and into adulthood, they're going to make their own choices, and those choices might choose to walk away from Jesus. I don't think that automatically disqualifies a person from eldership, but it should give us pause to say, well, wait a second, is there a reason for that? we should at least slow down. It's like a yellow, not a red light, but a yellow light. Let's proceed with caution and let's just investigate this. That's my thinking. So, for example, I know a fella. He just in the last couple of years he died of cancer. He in Auckland, New Zealand, was an elder at a church in New Zealand. Um, w- Genuine, godly, self-sacrificial, good man. 3 kids. Um, 2 of his kids were serving the Lord in ministry and have been faithfully for 15, 20 years. At the time I was with him in New Zealand, his oldest son not only wanted nothing to do with Jesus, but wanting nothing to do with the family. And they had had almost no contact with the oldest son for years. Now, I don't know whether that situation has changed in the last decade or so. Um, I don't think that automatically disqualifies this person from being an elder. He has 2 kids who not only are faithful to the Lord, they've given their life to ministry. They're deeply devoted to the Lord. They're raising their kids in the Lord and all that, right?
Yep.
Uh, so okay, we have a bigger test case than just 1 kid.
Yep.
We can see that okay, he faithfully led his family. Something went amiss with the oldest one, um, but it doesn't seem like the faith wasn't lived out at home. There wasn't love and Christ-like character at home. The other 2 kids, by their lifestyle and by their own explicit words, would testify to how good and loving and wise their home was, right?
Yep.
So that's the way I would approach it is, okay, no, it doesn't automatically disqualify them, but it should raise some questions. I know some other people who, are very knowledgeable in the scriptures. They would promote themselves as being deeply devoted to Jesus, but none of their kids walk with the Lord. Well, now I have a bigger red flag than just 1 kid. I'm like, okay, so what was going on at home that maybe made the faith unattractive if all of the kids walked away from the Lord? Yeah, it doesn't automatically, but I do have the light's starting to turn amber and pushing maybe a little towards red a little bit because I want to
Sure.
know. That raises real concerns for me. And we're not going to automatically install that person as an elder. We're going to have to take some time and we want to get to know them. We want to get to know what was going on in their family. And we want to get to know what their life was like at home and stuff like that. Because the home in the list is supposed to be a test case. It's just one test case, not the only test case, but it is one important test case.
Yeah.
That's kind of my thinking on it. What do you think?
Yeah, very similar, kind of landed a little bit more on yeah, some of those probing questions around, like what's being done to disciple your kid, especially if they're still at home.
Yeah.
Are you, you know, your kid says, I'm not interested anymore. Are they just like, okay, well, we're here if you need us, or are they continuing to disciple? How are they continuing to disciple them, not just, give up? Um, but I think it also changes a little bit when they're out of the house, maybe they're gone to college and now they're pretty far outside of your direct sphere of influence.
Yeah.
I think that changes things a little bit. But that question you said of what's happening at home that makes the faith unattractive, I think that's another good probing question,
Yeah.
because yeah, if they're yelling at their kids at home, or things like that um, are only visible at home, that's worth knowing about. And those things, scenarios could come up as an elder for sure.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's
And what that criteria or that qualification, at the level of sort of a big, broad general principle says to us is just because a guy goes to church regularly and just because he's faithful in attending church and just because he seems like a good or nice guy doesn't automatically qualify him to be an elder. We need to get to know this person. We need to get to know their life. We need to get to know what kind of person they are in the home or even on the job? What we need to know, what kind of character are they embodying beyond just seeing them at church on Sunday and being in Sunday school or Bible study with. And I think that's a mistake we've made. Is I've known people who've been put into positions of eldership, and it's like hey, they just seem like a great guy at church on Sundays, and everything we could see about them from their time around church events, man, seemed like a good dude, right? Well, no, there's more to life than just church events and all of that. So, what kind of person are they? Again, in their world, the household was also your place of work, your place of business, your place of everything else, right? The way you managed employees and everything else. So it's like we need to
Yeah.
get to know that. We need to get to know what kind of reputation does this person have, and how does he treat people? How does he manage people? And
Yep.
that provides an opportunity for us. So it reminds us of the importance of taking your time, getting to know people, investigating people, um, getting to know them in different contexts, different social contexts, maybe even doing some 360 type evaluations and having maybe some people that they manage at work fill out a little, write a little character reference and describe, and answer a few questions, maybe you know some extended family or what, just what can you do to kind of get to know these people? Do they embody Christ likeness to such an extent that they could be a good leader in the church?
Yeah. I think that's those are really good thoughts. I think if you flip it around, um, that argument works well because if they do have, say they have multiple kids and they're all just really faithful believers, that does automatically lend a lot of credence to the parents.
Yeah,
With that, you don't even have to know the parents super well to know that they've got to be pretty solid people if they
yeah,
have multiple kids who are really on fire for the Lord. That goes a long ways in people's minds.
yeah.
So,
It's what you're looking for is credibility, and that gives some credibility to their faith and faithfulness outside of church events, at home, in one of the most, you know, people at home, they know the real you, right? They experience the real you.
yep,
So,
for sure.
yeah.
Great. Well, I appreciate it. I always
Yeah.
love just throwing a grenade at you and see how you handle it.
No, and I do think, like you said, that's a really important question. So thanks for asking it. It's good conversation. So I think it'll be helpful to people.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks, John.
Yep. All right. So thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Bible in Life podcast. The Bible in Life podcast, along with the listener's commentary, is a listener-supported, crowd-funded Bible teaching ministry that's only possible because people who have been blessed by the ministry, impacted by the ministry, believe in the ministry, faithfully support the ministry. So thanks a ton for your support. And if you want to join that team of supporters, you can go to johnwhitaker.net, click the Give button. It'll redirect you to a page at World Family Mission, my page. World Family Mission is a registered nonprofit that serves as sort of a clearinghouse for donations to independent ministries and mission projects such as this. And so it'll direct you to that page. You can click the link, and then you can put in a dollar amount and click a little box that says Make This Monthly, and you can set up either a one-time or a recurring monthly donation right there. Let me say in advance, thanks a ton for your support.